Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful day. And wherever it is that you're joining us from, thank you, as always, for all of your support. We appreciate all the likes, the shares, the follows. Thank you so much to all our new YouTube subscribers. We really appreciate just everything that you guys are doing as far as engaging with our content, sharing it, listening, watching it, all of those great things. As you know, we do what we do for you so we can bring you some amazing conversations here in the education space. And of course, with the whole purpose of allowing us to listen to different perspectives, allowing us to continue to grow. As you know, education changes from day to day, but that's what we're here to do. Just bring you some amazing content to help each and every single one of us. And today I am really excited because I have an amazing guest, wonderful guest that I have been following for a great while, and I've been following on LinkedIn, following on Twitter. He definitely has a great YouTube video out, and we'll definitely talk a little bit about that as we get to talking about this topic as far as AI in education and kind of looking beyond the hype and just talking and sharing away some of the things that, as far as where AI may fall short, maybe some of the things that might be promising, maybe, but we'll get into all of that in just a second. But I would love to introduce my guest here, who's joining us all the way from California. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dan, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to be here. I think you always bring a really thoughtful lens to a lot of the tech hype. So I'm just pumped with the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. And I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time here with me today just to really understand, just the great work that you're doing, and you're putting out some amazing content. And I've always made it very clear on my podcast. I'm a very cautious advocate per se, but just really trying to balance things out and just bringing both sides, perspectives to people as far as anything new in ed tech, and especially now with Gen AI in the classrooms. So, Dan, for all our audience members that are joining us and watching this, whether it's on the replay or checking out the podcast, can you give us a little brief introduction and what your context is in the education space?
Yeah, no idea if I'll be brief, but here we go. I taught high school mathematics. I taught kids that did not like mathematics, freshmen on their second or third time through algebra. And that really has shaped so much of my work even today. I know the importance of engaging and motivating kids, what they're looking for in their education. And so I've been a part of the ed tech industry for the last 10 years, and I've seen how so many of the solutions that are on offer would work really well with like the top 5% most motivated students would be thrilled to do a lot of what's on offer. And I spent my time at Amplify building a core curriculum and digital lesson building software that supports the 95% of students, that digs where a lot of the ed tech industry has zagged. And we're really excited about the results from students, from teachers, and the market so far.
Excellent. Well, that's really exciting. And I'm really happy to get to know a little bit more about that as well, because being a former math teacher myself, teaching high school math and then even going down to elementary math, there will be probably some points where we would definitely find a lot of commonalities. And especially now that we're talking about generative AI within the classrooms and so on. So, first of all, Dan, I would love, and like I said, we'll get into a lot of the writing that you do through Substack, and you share a lot of great points, a lot of great views, both on LinkedIn and on Twitter, that I am a huge follower of, and many of my other friends too, as well. So, really, it's an honor to have you here on the show. So, what I would love to do is just kind of get your perspective. Let's turn again. I love to start this way, and let's take a time machine back to November 2022. And I want to know what it is that might have been going through your mind as we noticed that, November 22, things changed within the education space. As we know, the introduction of Chat GPT, and of course, we know all the subscribers within a short period of time and all of that, to just come to this point. So let me know a little bit about what your thought process, what you were feeling, the potentials or maybe mishaps of this technology within the education space.
Yeah, great question. I think I would dispute the idea that everything changed in the education space. I think you're absolutely right that in the commercial tech market, like, wow, things changed instantly. Everyone's pitch deck now includes some generative AI aspect to it. Everyone's creating these new startups that are just wrappers around open AI, API calls, that kind of thing. That definitely happened. My own reaction was, this is neat. Like, I'm not made of stone here. Like, I'm a nerd's nerd, former math teacher here. I love technology, and when it does new novel things that seem unexplainable, like I just thought I thought then and think now, this is just neat. When the words go on the screen, pop, 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 I'm like a seal, just clapping for more. I want more of it. It's just so interesting. So I thought it was neat. And by that, I mean to say, like, I'm right here. And when people say it's going to overtake everything and everybody, I'm like, I don't know about that. It seems just neat. I don't know if we should worry here. And also, when people say this is going to transform and save everyone and everything, I'm also saying, I don't know about that. It feels just neat. I backed off for a while. Like, I took a wait and see approach up until like spring of 23. Like, who am I? I don't know. I'm just like watching the field develop here. And eventually I come to the conclusion, which I'm still working out and working on, that this just doesn't meet, that Gen AI does not meet core needs of teachers and students. That this is the prediction I made, I think, in June. It's falsifiable. People can call me on it, make fun of me. But like, if I'm wrong, but in 5 years, my prediction was we're not going to see any changes to teacher staffing, to teacher attrition, to student learning that are discernible without a microscope. Like, you would not be able to say, like, oh, that was the moment that Gen AI came out and when teachers got so much happier and attrition went way down and student learning went way up. In the same way you can with COVID. With COVID, you can say, like, right there was probably a pandemic right there. I just don't think that the same thing will be true for generative AI. And I think the last 2 years have largely borne that out. I feel more confident in that prediction now than 2 years ago.
Excellent. And it's very similar approach. Like the way that I felt, I was like, well, at the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really exciting. Like very similar. It's very novel, the things that are coming out. And then, of course, I even interviewed Chat GPT on one of my podcasts, episode 164, when this first came out. And I was just, cranking away, putting in questions and getting answers and so on and so forth, just because this was novel to me. I mean, I love ed tech. This is the space that I live in, but really all it took is like, I think, what is it, March 2022, 23, sorry. I had a class that I was taking for one of my doctoral programs, and then talking about AI and talking about privacy and security. And that's really when I just did like a really hard pause on that, just because of the security aspect of it and talking about the data. And then, of course, we talked about, you mentioned it, very briefly, as far as the wrappers and so on, and so many companies that came up that were just, connecting to OpenAI's API. And of course, it just inundated, everything within the space as far as business. And then, of course, everybody wants to get into education, because education, there is a lot of money in education. Obviously, there's a need for something that is going to give teachers time back, for something that is really going to just make things a lot easier and personalize the learning. And then we started hearing all these buzzwords and so on and so forth. And then I was like, wait, just something just isn't quite right here, as far as that is concerned. And, you're talking a little bit about how many people say, oh, this is going to change and revolutionize education. So let me ask you, as far as this is concerned too, how do you try to reconcile, or is there any reconciling between both worlds, as far as seeing maybe a possible upside in the Gen AI aspect, and then, of course, that downside of it? Where do you stand?
Yeah, look, I just gotta say, no one would be more thrilled than me if Gen AI could provide major benefits to teachers and students. Like, I got kids in schools. I wish their teachers were just the happiest teachers possible for the time when my kids are in their class. I wish that learning was easier and more fun. Like, I want this to be a win. And, as an ed tech worker, if I had great transformative ideas here, like, that would be a win for my company as well. So I'm very interested in here, but I do just note the difference between what teaching and learning needs and what Gen AI offers. a prominent tech investor in the space. We were like arguing about this one time, very chippy. And he categorized teaching as like, he said that Gen AI like is basically free white collar work. And I thought that was like a really helpful moment of connection where I was like, oh, I get where you and your cohort, why you see this as being transformative when I do not. And that's because I see teaching not as white collar work, but as social work and white collar work and both. But the social work takes preeminence over the white collar work. And so much of what you, me, like trying to help students learn their least favorite subject in school by high school, what we know teaching is and learning is motivating students, helping them see they have a place in this discipline that they can learn, give them reasons to want to learn, have them like you to the degree that they're willing to do the work to learn it. And that's just not what Gen AI offers. So I think that there's lots of point solutions. There's lots of, individual moments where I've talked to teachers and they've said, yeah, Gen AI helps me like teach parent emails a little faster, reclaim like a few more minutes of time every couple of weeks. I'm like, that's great. Like good. But let's not confuse that with the reasons teachers give why they're so unhappy in their work right now.
There you go. Yeah, so definitely there's a lot of great stuff to unpack there because as I've had guests on here too as well, a lot of it goes back to just this, I guess that hype, like you said, giving teachers time back. And that's what they go with. And because they know that this is kind of what teachers are struggling the most. So they're really selling their products like this is going to give you that time back. And, like you mentioned, it's going to help you write those emails faster. But for me, one of the biggest areas of weakness that I do see in a lot of the products, because people often, will contact me and say, hey, can we show you this demo? Do you mind looking over this? And because of my, utmost curiosity, I'm like, sure, let's go ahead and take a look at this. And they tell you, like, oh, yes, we've added standards, we've added this, and look at the lesson plans. But then when you do go in there and use it or view it and see it, to me, it just seems like a lot of that really falls short, as far as the lesson plan
Yeah.
aspect of it. And to me, it just seems like, well, if you're gonna create something and your promise is that you're gonna save teachers time, why is the lesson plan not complete? And you're giving us an instruction of, hey, this is what you need to do. Go and create this and create this and create this. And I'm thinking to myself, I was like, so how is this really saving me that time? And so I know that I mentioned that because that is one of the things that really struck me the most when I did get to see your talk at the ASU GSB Air Show for the first time, after that. And you shared a demo. And I was thinking to myself, man, like Gen AI is really falling short here in this aspect as far as really delivering the whole product. And it's just simply giving you a bunch of words and buzzwords that all sound great together, but not a whole lot of substance or depth and breadth in a lesson. So, what is your take on that as far as right now, what you're seeing a lot of these ed tech companies? What is it that they're really lacking, or what do you think that Gen AI is lacking? And can these ed tech companies really make this product a little bit better?
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to make sense of something here. Like you, me, we're learners, we're curious people. Something doesn't make sense, we want to figure it out. And what doesn't make sense to me is the massive enthusiasm for Gen AI on LinkedIn or among the ed tech nerati, right? And like empirical data from out there. Like data point one is my own friends and family. Like I know teachers, my family's full of teachers, and we're in the Silicon Valley and none of them are using AI. I'm like, wait, why? Like they're like my age, they're tech friendly. Another is that Rand recently released data from its American Math Educator Survey, where they asked teachers, math teachers, 3,000 of them, very rigorous panel of teachers, how often have you used AI to support your instruction? This was in spring of 24. Like we are well into the hype cycle. And 82% of those teachers said never. Now, all my ed tech friends, God bless you. Like, I know you're like thinking back to other surveys you've seen, like from the Walton Family Foundation or Clever had this survey or that survey that we're all excited about. This is, the rocket's going up and we're all going to make it. But like, there's just some these data points now and then where it's like, what is going on? 82%. And so how I have like made sense of the difference is through this idea of a delivery problem. And it also points the way forward for the field, I think, which is to say, like when you go to one of these co-pilot tools, Magic School is the most prominent, for instance, there's a lesson plan developer. Oh my gosh, a lesson plan developer. Are you kidding me? And it has you type in like or enter the standards you want, like your objective, any other context you need, and then you press go and it goes pop, 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 pop. And I'm just thrilled. I love the pop, 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 pop. Can't get enough of the pop, 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 pop. And it gives you this like, this page of text describing a lesson plan. But teachers, I can see how why investors might get pumped about that, but teachers who have to implement it know how far that is from a lesson plan. They know that when they think about what lesson plan they're going to build, they have to like consider way more context than they can type into those blanks. Like, what have we done previously? What's our curriculum? What's our scope and sequence? What else? What methods have we learned previously? The vocab we've used, what day of the week is it? Are we tired, et cetera, et cetera. And then once it's developed, they frequently, the AI wrapper tools, they frequently talk about like an 80-20 rule where they say, like, look, hey, we know it's not 100% done. We've done 80%. You're going to have to do 20%. But like I'm looking at the instructions on the lesson plan to like make a practice set or develop 3 example problems or, come up with an engaging hook. I'm like, I asked you to make the engaging hook for the lesson plan. Why are you telling me to go make it now? It really starts to feel more like 2080 or worse, where it's just so much work to get the tool to do a thing that itself is not like anywhere close to done. It gives the teachers homework. And I know teachers don't need more homework. So
Ex-
the way forward is gonna have to be AI embedded more at the point of use, where it already has the context because it's embedded tightly into a platform of some sort. And it's able to produce a thing that's more useful because it lives inside that platform. I just don't see how these tools that take in pure text and output pure text, I don't see how they're going to be of use to teachers in the long run.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you on that. A lot of the things that you're saying is just because to me, I also follow Dr. Emily Bender, and I know one of my favorite things, and she always says it too as well. I mean, it's just really this synthetic text extruding machine that is really just making paper mache outputs because really what it's doing is it's taking this knowledge base and it's really just predicting the next word based on your question, and oftentimes it's not really, digging in deep, as far as the large language model is just really taking what your question is and just kind of putting those words together based on those words that you've already put in. And so sometimes, with using a lot of these platforms that promise you and say, oh, but we've added the standards, because that's one of my biggest things. I always say, okay, do you have standards? And I know in Texas, we've updated our standards this last year, and one thing that worries me about it too is, at least on that side of the large language model aspect of it, is just the knowledge cutoff dates. It's like, what is the knowledge cutoff date for Claude? What is the knowledge cutoff date for OpenAI? And if a teacher goes in thinking like, oh, well, let me go ahead and pop in, standard, let's say 44H in the state of Texas, where the students will be working with, I think it's fractions or something like that. Let me pop this in, and and you're just giving it that context. Are you getting a really true output of that? Because then, I mean, I would hope that as a teacher, as an educator, I would do my due diligence too, as well, to make sure that it does fit and coincide with the work that I'm doing. But oftentimes it comes back to that, Dan, that I noticed that I'm still gonna have to go back and revisit and redo and rework and making sure that everything falls in line, where oftentimes I'm like, you know what? The curriculum that we have within our district does just as good of a job, if not better, than what I am getting here. And, so those are some of the things, like I mentioned, that really concerns me. But one of the things that I did want to ask you, since we're kind of still here talking as far as the math is concerned, I know that you wrote a little bit about AI tutors. And so I want to get your thought about that. And as far as, what Sal Khan had written, as far as reflecting on his vision of EdTech, what do you think is the most important thing that we need to do to make the technology work better, not only for our teachers and students, other than maybe a chatbot?
Yeah, great question. If I can just like dip a little bit back into the history of ed tech circa 2010, that like I came of ed tech age alongside a whole group of startups that had a very different vision for what computers were good for. And this will be familiar to you and your listeners. They believed that computers were good for information distribution, that it would give you a video or some text that you needed, and that it would be good at evaluating whether or not you had understood that resource by asking you multiple choice questions or number response. You'd press submit and it would say good job or not good job. And in doing so, it would separate the entire class into 30 little individual student computer dyads. And it just winds up being the case, and this is validated through RAND research, through the Gates Foundation, that that model of schooling, of personalized learning, results in students who feel lower senses of belonging and safety and community, and a sense that there's an adult that knows who I am here at this school. That it's socially atomizing and isolating, all for gains that study found were pretty minimal. At the same time, me and my cohort envision computers in a different way. We look at what how people use their devices outside of class, how they use them to connect with other people and to create things from their lives and their thoughts that are meaningful to them. Photos and videos that don't just like stay on their phones, but go into their social networks where you can learn from what photos get likes and which ones don't. And so we created this math platform and curriculum where the teacher and the students are all together as a class with the device facilitating their interactions, where the computer's job is to use its interactivity to awaken the thoughts that students already have, to give them these little game-like environments where they pour their thoughts into it, and to share those thoughts with the teacher, who then grabs a few thoughts from the class and shares them in front of everybody. And the class grows tighter socially as a result, and people learn more. And I believe that just the two very different models. And when I see now chatbots, I just see a replication of this old ineffective model where instead of sending people to videos, we're sending them to chatbots, but they're still one to one. They're still just you and your chatbot. And I think the dirty secret of the industry that like everyone knows, but no one wants to talk about out loud, and it's not well studied, is that like K-12 kids don't want to watch educational videos. Like they don't want to watch 20-minute videos of someone talking to them about math. They want to learn about it from people they care about with people they care about. And the same is true about chatbots. Even though it's more quote unquote personalized, it is still the student interacting with the device in a way that students do not like. And there's a bit of that that's just like, I'm just saying this. There's like some evidence of it, but I have not been in a class where kids are just joyfully working one on one with their devices, which is why we use the entire class together with their devices. That's one of my main concerns with the model. And just like, I don't think it's going to work at scale because kids do not enjoy that particular interaction with computers in classes.
Hey, educators, ready for a game changer? I've partnered up with Goose Chase to revolutionize learning through play. This amazing platform helps students grasp key concepts, engage in epic challenges, and feel the thrill of discovery. From classroom scavenger hunts to district wide adventures, Goose Chase turns education into an unforgettable journey. Join the movement that's making learning fun again. Visit www.myedtech.life/myedtech10 and use code MyEdTech10 for 10% off any license purchase, whether it's individual, school, or district. Click the link in the show description and let's make education exciting together with Goose Chase. No, and that's one thing that, being in, at least in this role for the last 7 years and being able to see or visit campuses, that is one of the things too that I do notice and I do see where I oftentimes, speak with teachers and say, hey, you know what, maybe just not assigning that 20-minute video or that 15-minute video, maybe just getting a little bite-sized video. And I often tell teachers too, like, hey, you know what, a lot of that content that you have that you recorded, even while we were on lockdown with COVID, it's like, hey, that you can maintain that, make it evergreen. You're showing the math problems, these are frequently asked questions and they're little bite-sized things that you can share in a nice, whether it's through Google Classroom and so on, but at least you have that connection. Students are seeing that voice, they're able to see like, hey, this is my teacher teaching me for those, 2 to 3 minutes, or maybe 5 minutes at most in case you do miss because of that connection. So that's the one thing that I did want to talk about. And I know we talked about it a little bit because there's so much talk about, oh, AI is going to personalize the learning and it's going to personalize the learning. And I think you talked about it very well there too, that I do want to reiterate that you said, in doing so, I feel that many times in personalizing the learning, you're really, building those silos and you're siloing students from the bigger picture in working together where there should be discourse, there should be, a lot of collaboration, communication. And so it kind of feels like a contradiction where we say, well, I know that with Gen AI, these are the skills that the students will still need, which are communication, collaboration, and all of those things. But we want to personalize the learning. And so we want to take away that, communication and collaboration because we want them to do that with their chat bot. But again, going back to the input output, the student still has to give that context to that chat bot to get to where it needs to get as far as the answers. And we talked a little bit about that failure in delivery in that aspect. So, it's kind of, to me, it just seems like very counterintuitive right now. And it just, I'm that's just the way that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's been a post COVID, there's been so much interest in what are the tutoring models that will work to help students make up the lost opportunities to learn from COVID. And there's been a lot of money spent on a lot of different models, and only some of them seem like remotely effective, and only sometimes. And the ones that I've seen that seem effective from the research are ones where there are humans involved, consistent humans. So you like recognize the same person for multiple days out of the week coming in after school to support you. And those humans have significant amounts of training. It makes a lot of the other models look a little bit inadequate. And the idea and the personalized, the AI chatbot seems the most inadequate out of all those. It lacks all of those features. It is not humans. It's not a consistent presence that knows you. Like you can't fit your whole personality in the context window. So it just feels like you're starting fresh every time. And it's not trained on you and your context, basically. And so all you got to do is like look at what a successful tutoring interaction looks like for yourself, like for anybody. Just like go get tutored in something. I got tutored in computer science in JavaScript for a while this last year, just to learn, just to re-experience what a productive tutoring interaction looks like, and then ask yourself, is this chatbot capable of providing what was so valuable for me?
Absolutely. So the next thing that I do want to talk to you about is, you being in the ed tech space, like you mentioned, since 2010 and getting that experience up until now. And of course, now the main topic and that we're seeing is generative AI. So I want to ask you, what are some things that ed tech companies can do altogether? It doesn't have to be just a Gen AI company, but just ed tech companies to better support teachers without overloading them with their tech responsibilities.
Yeah, a couple come immediately to mind. And one is just to make sure that you have lots of teaching experience on staff, like ideally current experience. When I was first at a company called Desmos, we hired really well from the classroom. And that was such a helpful check on like there the ed tech industry is rife with just magical thinking about what the work of teaching and learning is. So many of these ed tech founders and early hires, they come from elite educations where they were autodidactic and found it very easy to learn on their own and didn't feel a ton of need for the social context of learning. You just got to get people to check your best and worst instincts there. Like if you were if you were building a startup for nurse practitioners, and you weren't coming from that world, you would see the need instantly to hire on medical staff, right? But the liability with ed tech is that every single person working in ed tech was at one point a student. And so they all tend to believe that their experiences are representative of the average student when they really aren't. So that's one. And then once you have that staff, to make sure you're in classes regularly, like there's just nothing like watching your best ideas in a classroom and you're like, oh, wow, like the rough edges are so apparent here. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's take this back to the lab and build the next draft of things. But getting in the classroom also super important. And I would just say finally to like however much you see the classroom as a social space, you've got to dial that up by like 200%. Like you have no idea the extent to which most students are really there. Like they are there for the social relationships that they enjoy. That is the glue for whatever cognitive work happens there. It's the social relationships that provide the glue. So your solution needs to work with, not against that glue, the reason why students are there.
And, and that's so interesting, the way that you put that, because oftentimes, and I'm gonna quote, here, sometimes it feels like we are that customer support too as well in a lot of ways. And I know that that's something that, through your Substack and through your through reading a lot of the articles that you post, which are great, and we'll definitely be sharing that link out in, on the show notes and things of that sort. But, you point out, those overlooking, the realities of the classroom. And I think that a lot of things that I do see is, and I'm talking even at a district level, many times when decisions are made, they're made, from the top, but there was never even like maybe like a walkthrough, or maybe just to kind of see how this particular grade level is doing. What are some of the things, maybe barriers, to the learning? Is it the technology? Is it the teaching? Is it just the setting and so on? So, a lot of times I feel that yes, they're creating a lot of these, ed tech companies create these tools and with this idea in mind that this is going to solve everything. But at the end of the day, it was like based on, you know, who and what kind of research, things of that sort. So I think that sometimes that's very difficult. And especially now, with Gen AI and so many platforms, which at least what I've noticed is, at least in the education space, it's kind of dwindling down a bit as far as the companies and the major names that are still out there. But don't get me wrong. I mean, although there isn't it technically Gen AI, but the companies that are out there that have these algorithms and personalized pathways are still doing some great things without even putting AI in their name, because seems like you just put AI on it and it's like, oh, I gotta have it, I need it, and it's a hype thing. But anyway, going back to what I was saying as far as, overwhelming teachers by not really focusing on what their needs are, and maybe sometimes putting way too much in the user experience and making them feel overwhelmed. I mean, uh, I can just say, like, how can we better this? I mean, really, honestly, it's just that teacher feedback. But is there anything else? Like, what kind of message as a teacher can we give an ed tech company to say, hey, like, slow it down a bit? Like this, you're giving us a lot of great things, or that I see, but maybe they're not all working for me. Like, do we have power as that consumer to make those changes and suggestions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that there's a real risk of just developing 50 different point solutions, 50 different AI wrapper tools, or, AI for this and that, 50 different tools for teachers that they've got to then learn to manage. And whatever gains that offer the teacher might be completely offset by the challenge of juggling those tools to the degree that teachers just aren't going to do it. And that's again me trying to make sense of what I perceive to be lower teacher usage than a lot of the hype would have us believe. I also think like it's just important for like a lot of the edtech industry sees teaching fundamentally as a software shaped problem. And teaching is again a people shaped problem. And one way to see that is like, their teachers are very vocal about why they dislike their work right now. Like the Merrimack teacher survey, like ask them, so what don't you like about this? And teachers are just like every year saying the same thing. And one of them is the administrative burden, the paperwork. And if you're an ed tech, founder who hears that and you don't have a teaching background, it's easy to believe like, oh, I have a tool, Gen AI, LLMs, text extrusion machines that can do paperwork. But then like you've just got to push ahead and be curious about the teaching context. I see so many ed tech companies that are so incurious about teaching and that work. But I've asked teachers, what paperwork specifically is burdening you? And as much as like ed tech companies want to believe it's like one form of paperwork that's easily amenable to AI LLMing, it winds up being like 50 different kinds of paperwork, student locker combinations, field trip forms that need to be sent out and then returned and managed, just all kinds of different genres. And when you see that, you're like, oh, wow, like this is actually a problem that we need to solve outside of software. Like we need to have an imagination. If you're an ed tech or a teacher, an imagination for the problems that aren't solved through ed tech or through teaching, but need to be solved through better planning around the school system. Like there needs to be efforts made to minimize teacher burden that have nothing to do with software. I think that's an idea that is often lost on people who are so used to developing solutions to problems. That this might not be a software problem. This might be a people problem.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that's right. You're hitting the nail right on the head that oftentimes, even though we do get these platforms and we do see the user experience and, the UX, UI of it and everything, but oftentimes, it's just like, ugh, like, if you would have just taken a little bit of time to think about this, actually we have a great platform that we use, but they did some updates and then all of a sudden they changed, a little feature on the languages and so on. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, how do we delete the language and so on? And in a white space, you have to hover over it because there was no icon, nothing. It's just, you're just you know, kind of moving your mouse around there and it's just the poor UX. They did end up fixing it, which is great because it gave feedback. But even then, sometimes it could just be very overwhelming. Or one platform that has like 75 tools where their main menu looks like a pile of fire ants and it's just overwhelming for any user. And so I think, like you said, that people, being at the center of it and just being able to give that feedback, but also ed tech companies really just listening because oftentimes I think they just go way too fast, way too quick, and they're really riding that hype that before you know it, all it takes is just for one of these companies that they may be plugging into as far as APIs and so on to go under. And then all of a sudden, like that's it, you're done and so it's just, we'll see where that goes. But kind of looking ahead, Dan, I just want to ask you, what do you see as the biggest opportunity right now for ed tech to really truly transform education? And of course, what role should we as educators play in that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the biggest source of untapped value right now is not technological but social. It's to realize the capacity and skills of the teachers at a given site and help those teachers network together and multiply their effect, freeing them up from lots of burdens on their time to help them do what they do best. And also, especially in math classes, the biggest opportunity in a math class right now is to realize what students bring to class every day. That students, it's often the idea that, like, look, what can they know? I've got to teach them before they know something. I got to give them 3 examples and ask them to do those 3 examples back to me. But the fact is, you pick a math topic and students bring ideas that are useful for that math. If it's about how to transform one shape into another, they know all kinds of informal ways to describe how shapes change before I offer them the really formal language. Because kids are pattern seeking machines. They have so much value they can bring, and they love to be seen for the value they bring. So the biggest untapped form of value in a classroom, the best way for edtechs to support what we're doing to amplify distance math is finding ways to like awaken in students what they know. Hey, you know stuff, and bring that to the surface in a way that a teacher can look at and see and make more value of. That's a kind of social classroom of the future.
I really love that. That's excellent, Dan. And then just to kind of round out the conversation, as we're getting ready to wrap up and hitting those last three questions, I want to ask you, Dan, if you can leave my listeners today with one piece of advice or insight on how to navigate this world of AI and ed tech, what would it be?
I think that whatever your role here, teacher, technologist, ed tech, funder, whatever, like this Gen AI has offered us, thrown the gauntlet down and offered us a really clear challenge to ask ourselves, what is the work of teaching? Like a lot of people in this space, it's like, oh, well, teachers, they'll do the motivational stuff and LLMs will do the cognitive stuff. But what Gen AI has made me reflect on and learn so much more about is the way that the cognitive and the social are so entwined and can't be separated. So the role is that the work is to help teachers do both simultaneously. So I would just recommend everybody, whatever your role, make sure you know what is teaching about.
Excellent. Way to go, Dan. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day today to just have this wonderful discussion and get to share just your views, amplify your voice, amplify your work. And for all our audience members, just in case if they do want to follow you on socials, how can they connect with you? Let us know.
Yeah, please hit me up at danmeyer.substack.com. Creating Math World is a Substack. I post there every Wednesday, ideas about teaching, technology, and math learning. Twitter at @DDMeyer, or rather X as we now call it. And follow me on LinkedIn if you can find your way past all the hype beasts out there. I'm there somewhere, posting little survey results here and there. Like maybe this isn't so hot after all. We'll see. So love to connect.
There you go. Absolutely. And we'll definitely make sure we put all that in the show notes. All right. Well, Dan, here we go. Before we end the show, I always love to end the show with the following three questions for all my guests. So hopefully you are ready. So here we go. Question number one. We know that every superhero has a weakness or a pain point. So for Superman, we know that kryptonite kind of, made him a little bit weak or weakened him from that power. So I want to ask you, Dan, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I think that I am overly focused on product over process. Like I'm in love with the moment where like your blood races a little bit, your heart skips a beat. You see a moment in a classroom that just is transcendent. And the kid and teacher both say like, oh, whoa, I'm awesome. Like I didn't know that was possible in this classroom. And I just love those moments. And the work for me, I just love my partners at Desmos and Amplify has been to figure out how to systematize and package those moments and make them, purchasable by districts using purchase orders and through procurement processes. And I like the people that are really good in ed tech, like they just love the full stack. They love the moment of instruction. They love interacting with superintendents of curriculum. Like they know the whole thing and love it. And I'm just like so enamored of one part of that. And so I need to keep on growing and becoming more enamored with some of the more process oriented aspects of ed tech.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. Question number two. If you can trade places with anyone in the world for a day, who would it be and why?
I think I'd love to trade places with one of my kids just to see what are you doing at school all day? It could be too terrifying. I don't know, but I'd love to know more about what schooling looked like from a kid's perspective. All the better if I could access my kids' like inner monologue as well, like eavesdrop and eaves watch. So that's what I'm thinking about.
There you go. I like that. That's a great answer. It's a very common answer nowadays when I ask it. So I love it. That's great. All right, Dan. And the last question is if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
I'd probably put one, like on Highway 101 here in California, right outside Silicon Valley, just like for ed tech developers, have you used your stuff? Like, have you actually used it? Since when? I just like we need to have people who are building for teachers, acting like teachers more often, using it, trying it out, seeing if it works.
Love it. That's great. I am all for that sign for sure, Dan. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for again being here, sharing this little bit of time here with us today here in the show. And I'm just really excited to get this show out and release it. Again, I'm a big fan. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and just really just the work that you put into a lot of your writing and of course sharing a lot of the stuff out there. Like you mentioned, you're in the middle of a lot of hype beasts that are out there, but your content is seen it's one of my favorite things to look forward to as well. Like, on Wednesdays when you do release, on Substack and, just to see what it is that you're going to be talking about, whether it's math or whether it's Gen AI. So thank you so much for being here and making my day. And for all our audience members, thank you so much for joining us and catching this episode. Please make sure that you visit our website at myedtech.life, myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 296 episodes, actually 297 after this one. So it'll be 297 episodes. So where you can find amazing creators, educators, entrepreneurs, edupreneurs. We've got a little bit of everything just for you. And I promise you, you can definitely take some of those knowledge nuggets and sprinkle them onto what you are already doing great. If you are not following us on all socials, please make sure that you follow us on all socials at My EdTech Life. And don't forget, jump over to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you can continue to get these amazing interviews and just all the content that we bring you. As you know, we're trying to do our best to bring you some wonderful conversations to continue to grow here in our education space. So, as always, my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.